My name is Trudy, and at 35 I thought I understood what family meant. As a successful lawyer who left my small hometown 15 years ago, I never expected to return to a Thanksgiving dinner where my own sister Amanda would stand up and declare I was no longer family. The silence that followed her words cut deeper than any knife on that table. What they didn't know was that I came prepared. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner table, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family. Growing up in small-town Minnesota wasn't easy when you didn't fit the mold. From an early age, our family dynamic was clear. Amanda was the golden child, and I was the awkward, bookish one who asked too many questions. While Amanda collected friends and admirers like trophies, I collected academic achievements and scholarships. Our parents never tried to hide their favoritism. When Amanda brought home B- grades, there would be celebrations. When I brought home straight, as there would be a distracted nod. "You should be more like your sister," my mother would say. "Amanda knows how to get along with people." What she meant was that Amanda knew how to conform. I never did. Our father, a respected local businessman who ran a moderately successful construction company, adored Amanda's ability to charm clients at company picnics. Meanwhile, my analytical mind and interest in justice issues made me the family debater, always challenging the status quo. This didn't win me any popularity contests at home. The real breaking point came when I announced my plans to attend law school on the East Coast. You would have thought I'd declared an intention to move to Mars. Law school. What for, my father had asked, genuinely confused. "You can get a teaching certificate at the state college. That's respectable for a woman. And you'll be close to home," my mother had added hopefully. Amanda, 22 at the time and already engaged to Jacob Wright, heir to the local real estate development company, had smirked from across the dinner table. "Trudy always needs to be different," she said, with that fake, sympathetic tone she perfected in high school. I left anyway. During law school, our differences crystallized even further. While I embraced new ideas and perspectives, my family, led by Amanda's growing influence, became more entrenched in their conservative viewpoint. Our phone calls grew tense, then infrequent. When I'd return for obligatory holiday visits, I'd find myself sitting silently through conversations filled with viewpoints I found problematic. After graduation, I built a successful career specializing in elder law and financial abuse protection. The irony of this would only become apparent years later. My professional achievements meant little to my family, who seemed more impressed by Amanda's social climbing as she married Jacob and became the unofficial matriarch of our family. As the years passed, Amanda solidified her position. When our parents began experiencing health issues, it was Amanda who stepped in to manage things. Living just 3 blocks away from them in the same town, she positioned herself as the devoted daughter, while I became the distant one who abandoned the family. The narrative was convenient and simple, despite my regular calls and offers to help financially. "We've got everything under control here," Amanda would say dismissively whenever I asked about medical appointments or finances. "Mom and Dad don't need to be bothered with your questions." The holiday visits became increasingly uncomfortable rituals. Amanda would host elaborate gatherings where I was physically present but socially excluded. Each year, I'd promise myself it would be the last time, yet some sense of obligation always pulled me back. Then 6 months ago, our father died of a heart attack. I flew home immediately, but by the time I arrived, Amanda had already taken control of everything from the funeral arrangements to his personal effects. At the service, I was barely mentioned in the eulogy she delivered. When I tried to speak with our mother afterward, Amanda hovered nearby, redirecting the conversation. In the months that followed, my concerns about our mother's health grew. Our phone calls became strange sometimes. She seemed confused. Other times, she would pass the phone to Amanda before we could really talk. When I'd ask direct questions about her medical care or finances, I'd get vague, dismissive answers. Then 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, Amanda called with an unusual request. "You need to come home for Thanksgiving this year," she said, her voice carrying that authoritative tone I'd grown to dread. "I was planning to visit at Christmas instead," I replied. "No, it has to be Thanksgiving. There's important family business to discuss." There was something in her voice, satisfaction perhaps, that triggered my lawyer's instincts. "It's not something to discuss over the phone. Just be here." She paused, then added, "Mom really wants to see you." That last part was the hook I couldn't resist. Our mother's health had been declining, and the thought that this might be one of our last holidays together compelled me to agree. What I didn't know then was that Amanda wasn't just planning a family dinner. She was setting a trap. The flight from Boston to Minneapolis was a 3-hour journey into my past. Each mile closer to my hometown of Cedar Springs brought a heavier weight to my chest. I hadn't been back since the funeral, and even then I'd stayed at a hotel rather than at my childhood home. Now Amanda's home, since she had helped our parents downsize 5 years ago by buying their house at what she called a family discount. I rented a car at the airport and drove the familiar hour-and-a-half route to Cedar Springs. The November landscape was barren trees, stripped of leaves, fields harvested and empty. It matched my mood perfectly. During the drive, I called my assistant at the law firm to check on cases and deliberately postponed the moment when I'd have to turn onto Maple Street. When I finally pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial where I'd grown up, Amanda's husband Jacob answered the door before I could even ring the bell. "Trudy," he said flatly, not stepping aside immediately to let me in. Jacob had always been cold toward me, treating me like an outsider from the moment he married into the family 12 years ago. Tall with prematurely gray hair that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old at 40, he had the practiced smile of someone who sold things for a living. "Jacob," I replied with equal coolness. "Is Amanda home?" "In the kitchen, directing traffic as usual." He finally stepped aside, adding, "You're in the guest room at the end of the hall. The kids are using your old room for their gaming setup." The kids, my niece Lily, 17, and nephew Brandon, 15, barely looked up from their phones when I entered the kitchen. They mumbled obligatory hellos without making eye contact. I couldn't really blame them. They hardly knew me thanks to the carefully maintained distance Amanda had cultivated. Amanda herself was at the kitchen island arranging a charcuterie board with surgical precision. At 37, my sister still maintained the beauty queen looks that had made her popular in high school. While I had our mother's more angular features and dark hair, Amanda had inherited our father's softer face and naturally blonde hair. Today she wore it in an elegant updo that looked effortless, but probably took an hour. "Oh, you're here," she said, glancing at me briefly. "Mom's resting. Doctor's orders, she gets tired easily these days." "What exactly is wrong with her?" I asked, setting down my suitcase. "You've been vague about her condition for months." Amanda's knife paused over a wedge of cheese. "She's 74, Trudy. Everything's wrong with her. Heart joints, memory some days." She resumed slicing with sharp, precise movements. "The guest room's made up. Dinner's at 6. Nothing fancy tonight since the main event is tomorrow." As I carried my suitcase upstairs, I noticed something that stopped me cold. The photo wall along the staircase had been rearranged. Where there had once been a balanced collection of family photos featuring all of us, there was now a carefully curated shrine to Amanda's family line. Photos of her children at various ages dominated. There were several of our parents with Amanda and her family. Even wedding photos of our parents had been positioned prominently. I was virtually erased. The single photo, including me, was a family portrait from about 20 years ago, positioned in the least visible corner of the arrangement. Even there, it appeared someone had placed it in a smaller frame that cropped me partially out of the image. In the guest room, a space that had previously been a home office, I sat on the bed and took deep breaths. This wasn't surprising behavior from Amanda, but it still hurt. I unpacked, quickly changing from my travel clothes into something more casual but still professional, old habits from wanting to appear put together around my family. As I headed back downstairs, I overheard whispers from our father's old study, now apparently Jacob's office. The door was partially open. "She's only here for the weekend," Jacob was saying. "Once everything's signed." The conversation stopped abruptly when I reached the bottom step. The door pulled shut with a decisive click. I found my mother in the sunroom, dozing in a recliner with a blanket over her legs, despite the room being quite warm. She looked much smaller than I remembered from 6 months ago, her face thinner, hands more translucent. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. "Trudy," she said, momentary confusion giving way to recognition. "You came." "Of course I did," I said, taking her hand gently. "How are you feeling?" "Oh, you know, old," she smiled weakly. "Amanda takes good care of me." Before I could ask any of the dozens of questions swirling in my mind, Amanda appeared in the doorway. Mom needs to rest before dinner, she announced. Dr. Sanders was very clear about her getting proper rest periods. I wanted to argue, but didn't want to upset our mother. I'll come back later, I promised, squeezing her hand before leaving. As I passed by Jacob's office again, I noticed something on his desk through the partially open door: legal documents, with what appeared to be our mother's signature on them. My legal training immediately kicked in, but before I could get a better look, Jacob emerged from the adjoining bathroom and quickly closed the door. That evening at dinner, the conversation remained superficial. Amanda dominated with stories about Lily's volleyball tournament and Brandon's coding club achievements. When I tried to share news about my recent legal victory in a class action suit against a nursing home chain, Amanda interrupted. That's nice, but did you hear that Lily was named team captain as a junior? After dinner, while helping clear dishes, despite Amanda's insistence that I wasn't needed, I noticed a leather-bound planner on the counter. It fell open when I moved a serving dish, revealing a page titled Thanksgiving Agenda. Near the bottom, one item stood out: Trudy situation papers ready. I closed the planner and placed it exactly where I'd found it, my heart racing. Something was definitely wrong here, and all my professional instincts were firing warning signals. Before going to bed, I tried to visit my mother again, but Amanda intercepted me. She's asleep already. Dr. Sanders prescribed new sleeping medication. She needs uninterrupted rest. As I prepared for bed in the impersonal guest room, I noticed that the door had no lock, unusual for a guest room. More concerning, when I tried to open the closet to hang up my clothes, I found it locked from the outside with a small padlock. Something very strange was happening in my childhood home, and I was beginning to suspect it went far beyond typical family tension. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and gray. I woke early, the unfamiliar bed and unsettling discoveries of the previous day making deep sleep impossible. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heating system. I slipped out of the guest room and made my way to the kitchen, hoping to have a moment alone before the day's events unfolded. To my surprise, my mother was already there, sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of tea, staring absently out the window at the frost-covered yard. "Mom," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her face brightening. "Trudy, dear, you're up early." Her voice sounded stronger than yesterday, more like herself. I poured myself some coffee from the pot that had already been made. I wanted some quiet time. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Better when the house is peaceful," she said, with a meaningful look that surprised me. For a moment, I glimpsed the sharp, observant woman who had taught third grade for 30 years before retiring. Then her eyes clouded again. "Amanda says we have important things to discuss today." "Do you know what those things are?" I asked carefully. She frowned slightly. "Something about the house. Or maybe the accounts. Jacob handles everything now." She waved her hand dismissively. "I get confused with all the papers." I moved closer, keeping my voice low. "Mom, are you happy with the arrangements here, with Amanda and Jacob making decisions?" She looked startled by the question, then glanced toward the hallway. "They take care of everything," she whispered. "Amanda says it's for the best." Before I could probe further, we heard footsteps on the stairs. My mother's demeanor changed instantly, her back straightening, a practiced smile appearing on her face. Amanda swept into the kitchen in designer loungewear, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She faltered slightly seeing us together, but recovered quickly. "Mom, you shouldn't be up without help," she scolded, giving me an accusatory glance. "You know, Dr. Sanders said to wait for someone to assist you in the mornings." "I'm not an invalid, Amanda," our mother replied, though her voice had lost its earlier strength. "Trudy and I were just catching up." "Well, you need to take your morning medications, and I need to start the turkey." Amanda efficiently guided our mother to her feet. "Jacob will help you back to your room. I've laid out your Thanksgiving outfit on the bed." As Amanda led our mother away, I noticed a pill organizer on the counter. Professional curiosity and growing concern made me examine it quickly. The compartments contained an assortment of medications, more than I remembered my mother taking 6 months ago. I recognized a blood pressure medication and what appeared to be a mild sedative, but several others were unfamiliar to me. I quickly took photos with my phone before returning the organizer exactly as I'd found it. The next few hours were a whirlwind of Thanksgiving preparations, with Amanda directing everyone like a field general. I was assigned minimal tasks, setting the table, but exactly as Amanda wants it, according to Jacob. When I offered to help with the cooking, Amanda declined. The kitchen's too small for two cooks, she said, though it never had been when our mother taught me to bake pies in that same space. Around 11, extended family began arriving. First came our mother's brother, Uncle Tom, with his wife Diane. Tom had always been kind to me, but today he barely made eye contact, mumbling a greeting before being whisked into Jacob's study. Aunt Diane gave me an awkward hug that felt like an apology. Next arrived our father's sister Martha with her husband Bill, followed by several cousins with their spouses. Each arrival followed the same pattern: brief, uncomfortable greetings to me, then being drawn into hushed conversations with Amanda or Jacob in other rooms. While helping Aunt Martha with her coat, I overheard a snippet of conversation between two cousins. Is she going to make a scene when they tell her, one whispered. Amanda says she's prepared for anything. The lawyer already. They noticed me and abruptly changed the subject to the weather forecast. With everyone else occupied, I slipped away to my mother's room, ostensibly to help her get ready. I found her sitting at her vanity, applying lipstick with an unsteady hand. Let me help, I offered, taking the tube from her. As I helped her with final touches to her appearance, I gently asked, Mom, have there been changes to Dad's will or your financial arrangements recently? She looked confused. Jacob handles all that now. Amanda says it's better that way because of my memory lapses. She lowered her voice. I do get confused sometimes, but don't tell Amanda. She'll worry. I nodded, helping her stand. Does Dr. Sanders come to the house to check on you? Doctor who? Oh no, dear. Amanda takes me to Dr. Phillips in town. He's new. The young man who took over for Dr. Miller when he retired. This contradicted what Amanda had told me about a Dr. Sanders providing house calls and specific instructions. I filed this information away. While escorting my mother downstairs, I made a quick detour to her bedside table where I found prescription bottles. I quickly photographed them as well. The formal dining room had been transformed for Thanksgiving dinner. Amanda had outdone herself with decorations, name cards, and an elaborate table setting. I noticed immediately that my place was at the far end of the table, separated from my mother by several relatives. As everyone gathered for pre-dinner drinks, I excused myself to make a quick call. Stepping onto the back porch for privacy, I contacted a colleague from my law firm who specialized in financial crimes. Alex, I need a favor. Can you run some quick background checks? I gave him Jacob's full name and birth date along with Amanda's. Also, can you tell me if there have been any unusual property transfers or new accounts opened in Cedar Springs, Minnesota under my mother's name in the past 6 months? While waiting for Alex to call back, I returned to the gathering, plastering on a smile that felt foreign to my face. Amanda was holding court in the living room, describing the extensive renovations they were planning for the house. My mother's house. Technically, while Jacob poured drinks that seemed stronger for some guests than others. My phone vibrated with a text from Alex. Call me as soon as possible. Found something concerning. I slipped back outside and returned his call. Trudy, your brother-in-law has 3 failed businesses that were investigated for fraud, though charges were never filed. He's currently facing a tax lien that hasn't been made public yet. And your sister has opened 2 new accounts as joint holder with your mother, with significant transfers from your mother's primary accounts over the past 4 months. My blood ran cold. Anything else? There's a new mortgage on your mother's house, the one your sister and brother-in-law are living in. Taken out 3 months ago with your mother listed as the sole borrower, despite the property having been transferred to joint ownership with your sister last year. The pieces were falling into place, painting a disturbing picture. I thanked Alex and asked him to send whatever documentation he could to my email immediately. Before rejoining the gathering, I quickly checked my email on my phone and found Alex had already sent several documents. I forwarded them to my personal printer account, along with the photos I'd taken of the medications and prescription bottles. Then I used a mobile printing app to send them to the nearest print shop in town. Delivery to this address in 1 hour, the confirmation read. I paid the rush fee without hesitation. Back inside, dinner preparations were in their final stages. I offered to run a quick errand, forgotten my allergy medication at the pharmacy, and Amanda, eager to have me out of the way during the final preparations, readily agreed. I drove quickly to the print shop, collected the documents, and organized them into the folder I'd brought with me from Boston, a folder I had initially packed with family photos and memorabilia as peace offerings. Now it would serve a very different purpose. On the drive back, I stopped at a convenience store and purchased a small digital voice recorder. Minnesota was a one-party consent state for recordings, and my legal instincts told me I might need evidence of whatever was about to unfold. When I returned to the house, everyone was already being seated for dinner. Amanda gave me an impatient look as I slipped into my assigned seat at the far end of the table. I placed my folder discreetly on the sideboard behind me within reach, but out of sight. As Jacob carved the turkey and Amanda directed the passing of dishes, I observed the strange undercurrent of tension in the room. Several relatives kept glancing at me, then quickly looking away. My mother, seated at the opposite end of the table from me, and next to Amanda, seemed diminished, somehow nodding automatically at whatever Amanda whispered to her. The recorder was running in my pocket. I took a deep breath and prepared myself for whatever was coming. The Thanksgiving feast laid out on the dining table was picture-perfect, like something from a magazine spread. Amanda had outdone herself with a 20-pound turkey, crystal glasses filled with wine and sterling silver candelabras, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Name cards written in calligraphy marked each person's place with charger plates and multiple utensils, intimidating in their formality. Despite the elegant setting, tension hung in the air like a storm front. Conversation remained stilted with unnaturally long pauses followed by two loud bursts of forced laughter. I noticed several relatives checking their watches repeatedly, as though waiting for a predetermined moment. Throughout the meal, Amanda played the gracious hostess, making sure everyone's glass remained full, especially my mother's, despite her medication. When it came time for the traditional family toast, Amanda stood and raised her glass. "To family," she said, looking around the table but deliberately skipping over me. "To those who stand by each other through thick and thin, who are there for the important moments, who don't abandon their responsibilities." The emphasis on those last words was subtle but unmistakable. Others murmured, "To family," while I sipped my water silently. My mother looked confused but smiled vaguely, already on her second glass of wine despite her medications. As the main course concluded, Amanda clinked her glass with a fork. The table fell silent immediately, too quickly, suggesting everyone knew what was coming. Before dessert, Amanda announced, "We have some important family business to discuss." She remained standing, smoothing her designer dress, as she looked around the table. Her gaze finally landed on me with a cold precision that sent a chill down my spine. "Trudy," she began, her voice carrying a rehearsed quality. "We've all been talking, and we feel it's time to address the elephant in the room." I set down my fork, my face carefully neutral despite my racing heart. "You left 15 years ago. You built your separate life. You've made it clear where your priorities lie." Amanda's voice hardened. "When Dad got sick, where were you? When Mom needed help with daily care, where were you? You send occasional checks like we're some charity case and think that covers your obligation." Several heads nodded around the table. Uncle Tom looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. "So we've made a decision," Amanda continued, straightening to her full height. "As a family, we took a vote." The moment stretched as she paused for dramatic effect. "We voted, and you're not family anymore." The words hung in the air, striking me with physical force, despite having suspected something like this was coming. Several relatives actually clapped. Aunt Martha looked down at her plate. My mother's expression crumpled in confusion. "What does that mean?" she asked Amanda, her voice small. "It means," Mom Amanda said without looking away from me, "that Trudy needs to formally renounce any claims to family inheritance or decision-making. We've prepared papers." She nodded to Jacob, who produced an envelope from beside his plate. "You've abandoned your responsibilities to this family, Trudy. You don't get to swoop in now that there might be something to gain." "Gain?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "What exactly do you think I'm after?" "Don't play innocent," Jacob interjected. "Your sudden interest in your mother's care, your questions about finances. We know what lawyers do, look for vulnerabilities, assets to claim." "You haven't been part of this family in any real way for 15 years, Amanda continued. "Mom needs stability and care from people who are actually here, not a distant daughter who can't be bothered to visit more than once a year." "Is that true, Trudy?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "You don't want to be part of our family." The manipulation was so transparent it made my stomach turn. Before I could answer, Amanda pressed on. "Mom has revised her will to reflect the reality of who actually takes care of her. The papers in this envelope formalize your exclusion from family decisions and inheritance." She held the envelope out toward me. Sign them, and at least you can leave with some dignity. I looked around the table at the faces of my extended family, some smug, some uncomfortable, all complicit in whatever Amanda had orchestrated. Finally, I returned my gaze to Amanda, who wore an expression of triumphant certainty. I laughed softly. The sound startled everyone, including Amanda, whose smug expression faltered. You know, I said conversationally in my line of work, I see a lot of elder financial abuse. It usually follows patterns: isolation of the elderly person, gradual taking over of their finances, mysterious new wills, and power of attorney documents. I stood up slowly. I've prosecuted dozens of cases just like this one. How dare you? Amanda spluttered, her face flushing red. After everything we've done for Mom. Everything you've done to Mom, you mean, I corrected calmly. I turned to my mother. Mom, when was the last time you saw Dr. Miller, your regular doctor of 20 years? Amanda says he retired, she replied uncertainly. He's still practicing. I checked yesterday, I said gently. I turned back to the table. I'm not signing anything. In fact, I think it's time we had a different kind of family discussion. Amanda's face hardened. You always were difficult. Fine, leave without signing. It doesn't change anything. The new will is already filed, the accounts are protected. You've been removed legally, we just thought we'd give you the courtesy of knowing to your face. I reached behind me to the sideboard and picked up my folder. Then you won't need this, I said, quietly placing it on the table in front of Amanda. Her curiosity got the better of her judgment. She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the first page, her face drained of color. She flipped to the next document, then the next, her hands beginning to shake visibly. What is this? She whispered. What is it, Amanda? Jacob demanded, reaching for the folder. Amanda screamed a sound of pure horror that silenced the room instantly. She tried to close the folder, but Jacob yanked it from her grasp. Evidence, I said simply. Bank statements showing systematic transfers from Mom's accounts to yours. Mortgage documents for a loan taken out in Mom's name that funded your kitchen renovation. Prescription records showing Mom is being given sedatives not prescribed by her actual doctor, and a preliminary neurological evaluation suggesting she's being over-medicated, creating artificial symptoms of cognitive decline. Jacob's face contorted with rage as he scanned the documents. You had no right to investigate us, he shouted. I had every right to investigate the welfare of my mother, I replied steadily. Especially when I received calls from her that she doesn't even remember begging me for help before someone took the phone away. My mother's eyes widened. I did call you, she said suddenly. I remember now. Amanda said I dreamed it. You're confused, Mom, Amanda said, quickly trying to recover. Trudy is just trying to manipulate you. Like you've been manipulating her, I challenged. Controlling her medications, isolating her from friends, limiting her phone access. Taking out loans in her name. That's not caregiving, Amanda. It's criminal. These documents prove nothing, Jacob blustered, though his face had gone pale. They're probably fake. They're verified by 3 different financial institutions and the county records office, I replied. And there's more. The folder also contains evidence of your tax troubles, Jacob. The liens against you that you've been hiding. The failed businesses with suspicious insurance claims. Amanda turned on Jacob. What tax troubles? What is she talking about? The unity of their front was crumbling before my eyes. She's lying, Jacob insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The folder also contains a formal complaint I've prepared for the district attorney citing elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy. I continued calmly. I haven't filed it yet. I wanted to give you a chance to make this right. You're bluffing, Amanda said, but her voice trembled. I pulled the digital recorder from my pocket and placed it on the table. Every word of this dinner has been recorded, including your admission about changing Mom's will under suspicious circumstances. Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recordings, in case you're wondering about legality. The room erupted into chaos. Amanda lunged for the recorder, but Uncle Tom, who had been silent until now, caught her arm. That's enough, Amanda, he said firmly. I agreed to come today because you said this was about helping your mother. This doesn't sound like help to me. You don't understand, Amanda cried. We've done everything for her. Trudy just swoops in and acts like she knows what's best when she hasn't been here. Is that why you've been forging Mom's signature on bank transfers? I asked quietly. Because you're doing what's best for her. My mother stood up shakily, her face a mask of betrayal. Amanda, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been stealing from me. Amanda's composure finally shattered. It wasn't stealing. We deserved it for taking care of you, for putting our lives on hold. The money was going to be ours eventually anyway. The admission hung in the air, damning in its selfishness. Jacob, seeing the situation deteriorating, made a sudden move toward the folder. This ends now, he growled, grabbing the documents and heading toward the kitchen. Stop him, Uncle Tom called out. My cousin Mark blocked the doorway as Jacob tried to leave. Get out of my way, Jacob snarled. This is my house. Actually, I interjected, according to county records, it's still legally my mother's house, despite the questionable property transfer you attempted last year. And those are copies. The originals are safe with my law firm, along with a detailed account of everything that happens here today. Jacob's shoulders sagged in defeat. He dropped the folder on the floor, papers scattering. Aunt Martha went to my mother's side, putting an arm around her shoulders. Ellen, I had no idea, she said softly. Amanda told us Trudy had abandoned you, that she was trying to force you into a nursing home to get control of your assets. That's what Amanda told all of us, Uncle Tom confirmed, his expression grim. She said this meeting was to protect you from Trudy's attempts to take control. My mother looked around the table at the family members who had been manipulated into turning against me, then at her elder daughter who had betrayed her so completely. Her face crumpled as the full reality of the situation hit her. How could you? She whispered to Amanda. After everything we gave you. Amanda had no answer, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The elegant Thanksgiving dinner devolved into chaos within minutes. Aunt Diane knocked over her wine glass, staining the pristine tablecloth crimson. Uncle Tom's usually quiet voice rose to a thunderous volume as he demanded answers from Jacob. Cousins, who moments before had been united against me, now backed away from Amanda and Jacob as though their deceit might be contagious. Amanda, seeing her carefully constructed narrative collapsing, tried one last desperate tactic. Mom, she pleaded, rushing to our mother's side. You know everything I've done has been for you. Trudy's twisting things, making normal family help sound sinister. You know I'd never hurt you. My mother looked at her with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of heartbreak and dawning clarity. The lake house, my mother said quietly. Amanda froze. What? Your father's lake house. The one he inherited from his parents. You told me we had to sell it because of medical bills. But there weren't any big medical bills yet. My mother's voice grew stronger with each word. Where did that money go, Amanda? Jacob started edging toward the door. Uncle Tom's son Michael blocked his path with a firm shake of his head. Amanda's composure cracked further. We needed it for the business. Jacob's development was going to make everything back tenfold, but we needed seed money. Her voice took on a desperate, pleading quality. It was an investment in our future. Your future too, Mom. So you sold my lake house without telling me. Without it being yours to sell. Our mother's voice was steady now, decades of authority as a teacher returning to her bearing. What else have you taken from me, Amanda? Nothing. Everything was for your own good. Amanda looked around wildly, seeking allies where there were none. You were getting confused, forgetful. Someone had to take care of things. By over-medicating her, I interjected. The blood tests I had run from her last physical, which you conveniently lost, show sedative levels well beyond therapeutic dosage. You had no right to her medical records, Amanda shrieked. I have medical power of attorney, I replied calmly. Dad made sure of it before he died. He was concerned about certain things he'd noticed. This was a calculated bluff. I had no such document, but Amanda's reaction told me everything. He couldn't have. We were very careful about what papers he signed toward the end. The admission silenced the room. Jacob closed his eyes in defeat. Careful about what papers he signed? Our mother repeated, her voice, dangerous in its quietness. What exactly does that mean, Amanda? Before Amanda could answer, Jacob broke. It wasn't my idea, he said quickly. Amanda said your father was being stubborn about changing his will. She said we deserved more for taking care of things. Amanda whirled on him. Shut up, Jacob. No, I'm not taking the fall alone for this, he shot back. It was your idea to increase your mother's medication before the attorney visits. You said it would make her more compliant with the changes. Brandon, who had been silent until now, stood up from the table. Mom, is that true? Did you drug Grandma to steal from her? The 17-year-old's voice cracked with emotion. It wasn't stealing, Amanda insisted again. It was securing what was rightfully ours. What we earned by being here, unlike some people, she glared at me. Lily, 15, and previously absorbed in her phone, looked up with horror. You've been drugging Grandma. That's why she's been so weird lately. I thought she was just getting old. Stay out of this, Lily Jacobs snapped. You don't understand adult matters. I understand enough, Lily retorted, showing a backbone I hadn't expected. I understand that drugging someone is wrong. They taught us about elder abuse in health class. Amanda made a sudden lunge for my folder again, but Uncle Tom caught her arm. That's enough, Amanda, he said firmly. I think we need to call the police. The police, Amanda's voice rose to a near scream. For a family disagreement. Are you insane? For elder abuse, I corrected. Financial exploitation. Possibly prescription fraud, depending on how you've been getting those extra sedatives. Jacob's face hardened. No one's calling anyone. We're going to sit down like adults and work this out. His tone carried a threat that set alarm bells ringing. I noticed his hand slipping into his pocket. Remembering his history of fraud allegations, I had a sudden suspicion. Jacob, I said carefully. I should mention that beyond the copies of documents in that folder, I've emailed everything to my law partners, my assistant and 2 colleagues in the district attorney's office with instructions to file the formal complaints if they don't hear from me by a specific time tonight. His hand stilled. I pressed my advantage. I also took the liberty of photographing Mom's medications and sending them to a forensic pharmacologist. He's already identified 2 prescriptions that contradict each other and would create symptoms mimicking dementia when combined. This was another calculated bluff, but Jacob had no way of knowing that. The flash of panic across his face told me I'd hit close to the mark. This is ridiculous, he blustered. You can't just come in here and make wild accusations. A sharp knock at the front door interrupted him. Everyone froze. That would be the police, I said calmly. Our neighbors called them, concerned about the shouting. In truth, I had no idea who was at the door, but the bluff worked. Jacob's face went ashen. Uncle Tom went to answer the door. We heard murmured conversation, then he returned with 2 police officers. We received a call about a disturbance, the older officer said, taking in the tense scene with practiced eyes. Everything all right here? Before Amanda or Jacob could speak, my mother stood up. Despite her small stature, she commanded the room with the authority of a woman who had controlled classrooms of rowdy children for decades. No, officer. Everything is not all right, she said clearly. I believe my daughter Amanda and her husband have been stealing from me and medicating me without my knowledge. I would like to file a report. Amanda gasped. Mom, you don't know what you're saying. It's the medication talking. The medication you've been giving me without my consent, my mother countered with surprising sharpness. I may be old, Amanda, but I'm not stupid. Things are becoming very clear to me now. The younger officer took out a notepad. Ma'am, these are serious accusations. Do you have any evidence of these claims? I do, I said, stepping forward and identifying myself as both her daughter and an attorney specializing in elder law. I gestured to the scattered documents on the floor. Financial records, prescription records, and witness statements about my sister's actions. The older officer looked at Jacob, whose face had set into a mask of cold fury. Sir, I'm going to ask you to keep your hands where I can see them. Jacob slowly raised his hands, shooting a venomous look at Amanda. This is her fault, he said. All of it. She's the one who came up with the plan. Jacob, Amanda cried out betrayal written across her face. I'm not going down alone for this, he said coldly. It was your idea to start changing your mother's medications. Your idea to get her to sign over the house. Your idea to empty the accounts before Trudy could contest anything. As Jacob continued implicating Amanda to save himself, I went to my mother's side. She was trembling but standing straight, years of fog seemingly lifted from her mind. I'm so sorry, Mom, I whispered. I should have realized sooner. No, I'm the one who should have seen it, she replied softly. A mother should know her own children better. She squeezed my hand. At least I still have one I can trust. The officers separated Amanda and Jacob for preliminary questioning, taking them to different rooms. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence, the Thanksgiving turkey growing cold on the table. Aunt Martha approached me hesitantly. Trudy, we had no idea. Amanda told us you were trying to put your mother in a home and take her money. She showed us emails supposedly from you. Forged, obviously, I said, without rancor. Amanda's been spinning narratives about me for years. I'm just sorry everyone believed them without asking me directly. Uncle Tom looked ashamed. We should have known better. Your father would be horrified by what's happened here. As the initial shock wore off, practical matters came to the forefront. The officers informed us they would need statements from everyone present. My mother would need to go to the station to file a formal complaint, and there would likely be an investigation into the financial aspects of the case. In the midst of this, Brandon and Lily stood awkwardly at the edge of the room, looking lost and frightened. Despite everything, they were still just teenagers whose world had just imploded. I approached them carefully. This isn't your fault, I told them gently. None of it. Did Mom and Dad really drug Grandma? Brandon asked, his voice small. I chose my words carefully. It seems your mom made some very bad choices about your grandmother's care. The police will sort out exactly what happened. Where will they go? Lily asked, tears in her eyes. I had no easy answer for that. The legal system would take its course, but the damage to this family would not be repaired quickly or easily. As Amanda was escorted from the house by one of the officers, she turned to glare at me with pure hatred in her eyes. You'll regret this, she hissed. You have no idea what you've done. I met her gaze steadily. I know exactly what I've done, Amanda. I've protected our mother from you, something I should have done years ago. The remainder of Thanksgiving Day passed in a blur of police statements, tearful realizations, and the systematic dismantling of Amanda and Jacob's scheme. Instead of pumpkin pie and football, the extended family spent the evening helping my mother understand the extent of the betrayal while coming to terms with their own unwitting roles in it. By nightfall, Amanda and Jacob had been taken to the police station for further questioning. The house, technically still my mother's, despite Amanda's claims, fell quiet, except for the occasional sniffle from Brandon or Lily, who had chosen to stay rather than go with their family friends who'd offered temporary housing. What happens now? My mother asked, as we sat together in the living room, the fancy table settings from earlier, now cleared away, replaced by cups of tea and hastily made sandwiches. Legally, there's a process, I explained gently. There will be an investigation. With the evidence I've gathered, plus their own admissions, Amanda and Jacob will likely face charges for financial elder abuse at minimum. And the children, she asked, glancing toward the kitchen where Brandon and Lily were quietly washing dishes, finding comfort in the mundane task. That's complicated, I admitted. They're old enough to have some say in where they go. There are family courts that will make determinations if Amanda and Jacob are detained for an extended period. Uncle Tom, who had remained along with Aunt Diane, spoke up. They can stay with us if needed. They shouldn't be uprooted from their school and friends because of their parents' actions. I nodded gratefully. Tom had always been the most level-headed of the family, even if he had temporarily fallen for Amanda's manipulation. The next morning, I called my law firm and arranged for an extended leave of absence. What had been planned as a weekend visit would now stretch into weeks, possibly months, as we untangled the legal mess Amanda and Jacob had created. My colleague Alex flew in from Boston the following day, bringing additional legal resources and expertise in financial fraud cases. Together, we began the painstaking process of documenting every transaction, every forged signature, every unauthorized medication change. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd initially suspected. Over the past 3 years, Amanda and Jacob had systematically diverted nearly $300,000 from my mother's accounts, money from my father's life insurance, retirement funds, and the sale of assets, including the beloved family lake house. They were accelerating their timeline, Alex noted, as we reviewed bank records in what had been Jacob's home office. The transfers were getting larger and more frequent in the past 6 months. After Dad died, I said, connecting the dots. They probably realized Mom's declining health meant their window of opportunity was closing. The medication situation proved equally disturbing. Working with a geriatric specialist who agreed to make a house call, we discovered that my mother had been given a combination of sedatives and anti-anxiety medications that, when taken together, created symptoms mimicking cognitive decline. It's actually quite common in elder abuse cases, Dr. Wilson explained after examining my mother. The victim appears confused and forgetful to outsiders, making it easier for the abuser to take control. Once we get her on the correct medication regimen, I expect you'll see significant improvement. True to his prediction, within just a week of properly managed medications, my mother seemed years younger. Her memory sharpened, her hands stopped trembling, and the vacant look that had concerned me vanished. "It's like waking up from a bad dream," she told me one morning over coffee. I kept thinking something was wrong, but Amanda always had an explanation. She'd tell me I was confused, that I'd agreed to things I had no memory of agreeing to. "That's gaslighting," I explained. "It's a form of psychological manipulation." "I should have seen through it," she said, her expression hardening. "I taught children for 30 years. I know what manipulation looks like." "Professional manipulators target even the smartest people," I assured her. "And Amanda has had a lifetime to learn your vulnerabilities." The legal consequences unfolded rapidly. Jacob, facing additional charges related to his business dealings, quickly turned on Amanda in exchange for a plea deal. Amanda, confronted with mounting evidence and abandoned by her husband, maintained her innocence, even as she was indicted on multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. Their bail hearings revealed just how desperate their financial situation had become. Despite the money they'd taken from my mother, they were deeply in debt from failed investment schemes and lavish spending. The beautiful lifestyle they'd portrayed, the renovations, the luxury car in the garage, the designer clothes had been built on a foundation of theft and fraud. While the legal system dealt with Amanda and Jacob, I faced the more immediate challenge of helping my mother rebuild her life and caring for my niece and nephew who were traumatized by the sudden implosion of their family. "Did you know," Lily asked me one evening as we sat on the porch swing, "did you know what Mom and Dad were doing all this time?" I suspected something was wrong, I admitted, but I didn't know the extent of it until recently. I should have looked more closely sooner. "I heard things," she confessed. "Arguments about money, Dad telling Mom they needed to speed things up with Grandma. I didn't understand what it meant." "It wasn't your responsibility to understand," I assured her. "You're 15. Your job is to be 15, not to police your parents' behavior." Brandon had a harder time adjusting. At 17, he'd been closer to understanding his parents' actions, and his shame ran deeper. "I helped Dad with some of the paperwork," he admitted during a walk around the neighborhood. "He said it was for Grandma's estate planning. I didn't know they were stealing." "You couldn't have known," I told him firmly. "They deceived everyone, including me, and I'm a lawyer who specializes in exactly this kind of case." Gradually, we established a new routine. My mother remained in her house, reclaimed from Amanda's control, with me staying there to provide support. Brandon and Lily split their time between their grandparents' home and Uncle Tom's house, maintaining their school schedules and extracurricular activities as normally as possible. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, we received unexpected news. Jacob, continuing his strategy of saving himself, had provided prosecutors with information about additional accounts where Amanda had hidden money. A safety deposit box in a neighboring town contained nearly $50,000 in cash and several pieces of family jewelry that had supposedly been lost. "She took Mom's engagement ring," my mother said quietly when I told her. "She told me it must have fallen off while I was gardening." The recovery of these items brought a bittersweet validation. Each returned possession represented not just financial value, but the restoration of truth. Amanda, facing mounting evidence and abandoned by nearly everyone, finally reached out through her court-appointed attorney with a settlement offer. In exchange for reduced charges, she would provide a full accounting of all misappropriated assets and make no claim to any family property. "Should we accept?" my mother asked when I presented the offer. "That's entirely your decision," I told her. "A trial would be lengthy and emotionally draining, but might provide more complete accountability." She thought for a long moment. "I want this over with. I want to rebuild what's left of our family without dragging this out for years in court." The prosecutor agreed to the deal with the stipulation that Amanda would still serve time, likely 2 to 5 years depending on her behavior, and the final restitution amount. As the winter holidays approached, we faced the challenge of creating new traditions from the ashes of old ones. Brandon and Lily's first visit to see their mother in custody was difficult but necessary. They returned subdued but somewhat relieved. "She seemed different," Lily said. "Less intense. She actually listened when we talked." "Prison has a way of adjusting perspectives," Uncle Tom observed dryly. For my part, I was forced to make difficult decisions about my own future. My law firm had been understanding about my extended absence, but eventually choices would need to be made. My life and career were in Boston, but my family needed me here. One snowy evening in December, as my mother and I sat reviewing financial records in the dining room, the same table where Amanda had made her devastating announcement a month earlier, she looked up at me with sudden clarity. "You should move your practice here," she said. "There's a need for elder law expertise in this community." Today's work made that painfully obvious. I looked up surprised by the suggestion. "Move back to Cedar Springs. I haven't lived here in 15 years. "Not necessarily in Cedar Springs itself," she clarified, "but somewhere closer than Boston, Minneapolis perhaps. Near enough to visit regularly, far enough to build your own life." The idea took root as December turned to January. My law firm, recognizing an opportunity to expand, suggested opening a Midwest branch office with me at the helm. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it offered a balance between professional fulfillment and family responsibility. In late January, I received a letter from Amanda. Unlike her previous communications, which had been filled with blame and self-justification, this one contained something unexpected, the first glimmers of genuine remorse. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I see now what I've done. To Mom, to you, to my children. The counseling here is forcing me to face truths I've spent a lifetime avoiding." I shared the letter with my mother, who read it in silence, before carefully folding it and returning it to the envelope. "Do you think she means it?" she asked. "I think prison gives people a lot of time to think," I replied carefully. "Whether that thinking leads to lasting change is something only time will tell." She nodded, then surprised me with her next words. "I'm going to write back to her." "Are you sure that's wise?" I asked. "No," she admitted, "but she's still my daughter, just as you are. The road to whatever relationship we might salvage has to start somewhere." Her wisdom humbled me. Despite everything Amanda had done, our mother could still see the possibility of redemption, distant and uncertain but not entirely extinguished. As winter began its slow transition towards spring, our reconstructed family took tentative steps forward. Brandon decided to attend the state university where I had started my own education before transferring east. Lily threw herself into advocacy work, joining a student group focused on elder rights. My mother, free from inappropriate medication and with her financial security restored, began volunteering at the local library. And I found myself house hunting in Minneapolis, preparing for a life I had never anticipated, one that balanced my career ambitions with newfound family connections. The family that Amanda had tried to exclude me from had transformed into something new, something smaller in some ways, but more authentic. The bonds tested by betrayal and strengthened by shared recovery felt more genuine than the forced family gatherings of the past. It wasn't the life I had planned, but as I signed the lease on my new office space, I realized it might be something better, a life built on truth, rather than obligation, on choice, rather than expectation. 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner that shattered our family's facade, I stood in my new office overlooking the Minneapolis skyline. The plaque on the door read Trudy Anderson, Elder Law and Financial Protection Services. The space was smaller than my corner office in Boston, but it felt right close enough to Cedar Springs for regular visits, far enough to maintain my independence. My mother had made remarkable progress since being freed from Amanda's manipulation. With proper medication and the cloud of induced confusion lifted, she had returned to many of her former activities. She joined her church choir again, resumed her weekly bridge games, and even started teaching adult literacy classes at the community center. At 74, she had reclaimed her life with a vigor that inspired everyone around her. "The doctor says my cognitive tests are now normal for my age," she announced proudly during our weekly Sunday dinner. He said there's no sign of actual dementia, just the aftermath of improper medication. The legal matters had reached their conclusions as well. Jacob, who had cooperated extensively with prosecutors, received a 3-year sentence with eligibility for parole after 1 year. Amanda, who had eventually accepted responsibility but more reluctantly, received 5 years with the possibility of parole after serving 2. The financial restitution process had been complex but thorough. Most of my mother's assets had been recovered, though some, like the lake house, were gone forever. The court had established a repayment plan for Amanda and Jacob that would continue long after their release from prison. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of our recovery had been navigating relationships with Brandon and Lily. At 17 and 15, they were old enough to understand their parents' crimes, but young enough to still need parental figures in their lives. "I don't want to see Mom today," Brandon announced one Saturday morning when a prison visit was scheduled. "I've got a project due and I need to work on it." "That's your choice," I told him carefully. "But remember that healing happens at different rates for everyone. Your mom is trying to make amends in her own way." By sending letters full of excuses, he challenged. "Her most recent letters have been different," I pointed out. "She's taking more responsibility." He shrugged, the gesture so typical of teenagers, yet weighted with unusual burden. "Maybe next month." Lily, by contrast, had maintained more regular contact with Amanda. Her approach was more confrontational, asking direct questions about her mother's choices and holding her accountable for the answers. In some ways, her directness seemed to be helping Amanda face reality more effectively than professional counseling. "Mom actually apologized today," Lily reported after one visit. "Not one of those 'I'm sorry but' apologies. A real one where she admitted she knew what she was doing was wrong." These small steps toward accountability gave us hope, though none of us harbored illusions about returning to some idealized version of family. Whatever relationship might eventually emerge would be new, built on different foundations than before. Uncle Tom and Aunt Diane had become unexpected pillars of support. Tom, feeling partially responsible for not recognizing Amanda's manipulation, sooner had thrown himself into helping establish proper financial protections for my mother. "I should have asked more questions," he said repeatedly. "When Amanda started talking about your mother's confusion, I should have insisted on speaking directly with her doctors." "We all miss signs," I reminded him. Amanda was skilled at controlling information. The extended family, initially divided and confused by the Thanksgiving revelations, had gradually realigned. Some relatives remained distant, uncomfortable with the messy reality of what had happened. Others drew closer, determined to rebuild something authentic from the ruins of our family mythology. Cousin Mark had become a regular visitor, bringing his children to spend time with my mother. "They need to know their great-aunt," he explained. "The real her, not the version Amanda presented." In April, I received an unexpected letter from Jacob. Unlike Amanda's correspondence, which had evolved from blame to grudging acknowledgement to genuine remorse, Jacob's letter was pragmatic and direct. "I won't pretend I didn't know what was happening," he wrote. "I could give you the story about financial pressure and desperation, but the truth is simpler. I saw an opportunity and took it. I didn't think about the harm, only the benefit to myself. I'm telling you this not to ask forgiveness, but because someone should acknowledge the plain truth without excuses." I shared the letter with my mother, who read it in thoughtful silence. "It's strange," she finally said. "This feels more honest than anything Jacob ever said to me when he was living in my house." "Prison can strip away pretenses," I observed. "Or create new ones," she countered wisely. "Time will tell which this is." As spring turned to summer, we marked the 1-year anniversary of my father's death with a small ceremony at his grave. The family that gathered bore little resemblance to the one that had assembled for the funeral a year earlier. Amanda was absent, of course, but so were the false pretenses and hidden agendas that had characterized family gatherings for years. "Your father would be proud of you," my mother told me as we placed flowers on his grave. "He always said you had a compass that pointed true." "Did he?" "He never told me that." She smiled sadly. "He wasn't good at saying the important things directly. But in his last months, when he suspected something wasn't right with the finances, he told me to trust you if anything happened." This revelation brought both pain and healing. Pain that my father had harbored suspicions. He never acted upon healing in knowing he had seen my worth despite our differences. The healing process wasn't linear. There were setbacks, like when we discovered additional forged documents Amanda had hidden, or difficult days when Brandon refused to talk about his parents at all. There were uncomfortable conversations with friends and neighbors who had believed Amanda's narrative about our family dynamics. There were moments of anger that arose unexpectedly, triggered by small reminders of the betrayal. But there was also growth. My relationship with my mother deepened beyond anything we'd had before, built on honest conversations rather than obligatory check-ins. My connection with Brandon and Lily evolved from awkward aunt-niece divided by nephew formality to something more meaningful as we navigated their parents' absence together. In July, Amanda was granted permission to participate in a restorative justice program that included family counseling. My mother decided to attend. I was more hesitant. She manipulated trained professionals for years, I reminded my mother. A prison counselor won't necessarily see through her. I'm not going with illusions, my mother assured me, but I need to look her in the eye and hear whatever she has to say, for my own closure, if nothing else. I respected her decision, though I chose to wait for more evidence of genuine change before engaging in similar sessions myself. The reports my mother brought back were cautiously encouraging. Amanda seemed to be doing the difficult work of confronting her actions without deflection. By fall, I had established a routine that balanced my new legal practice with family responsibilities. My apartment in Minneapolis became a weekend stopover for Brandon, now starting college, and occasional shopping trips with Lily. My mother maintained her independence while accepting appropriate help. We had created a new normal from the wreckage of the old. The most profound changes, however, were internal. The betrayal had forced all of us to reconsider what family truly meant. Was it defined by blood and legal ties? By shared history? By something deeper and less easily defined? Family is a choice, I told a client who was navigating her own complex family dynamics. Sometimes the people we're born to are our true family. Sometimes we have to build our family from other connections. Often it's a combination of both. This philosophy guided my personal choices as well. I maintained boundaries with Amanda, engaging only to the extent that felt healthy. I invested in relationships with extended family members who had shown their character during the crisis. And I opened myself to new connections in Minneapolis, building a circle of friends who knew me as I was now, not as the family outsider I had been labeled. When Thanksgiving approached again, we faced the question of how to mark the anniversary of our family's implosion. My mother suggested something radical, a complete reinvention of the holiday. "Let's take a trip," she proposed. The four of us, you, me, Brandon, and Lily. Somewhere none of us has ever been. Make new memories instead of reliving old ones. We chose Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place none of us had visited before. In a rented adobe house with mountain views, we prepared a non-traditional meal together, each contributing a dish that held personal meaning rather than family tradition. We shared stories not of past holidays, but of moments of personal growth over the challenging year. I learned that strength doesn't always look like I thought it would, my mother said, when we went around the table sharing insights. Sometimes it's admitting you were deceived. Sometimes it's forgiving yourself for not seeing clearly. I learned that family isn't automatic, Brandon added. It's something you build through actions, not just blood. I learned that truth matters more than comfort, Lily said with wisdom beyond her 16 years, even when it hurts. When my turn came, I thought carefully before speaking. I learned that sometimes what seems like an ending is actually a beginning. What happened last Thanksgiving wasn't just the end of old illusions, it was the start of something more authentic. As we finished our meal under the vast New Mexico sky, I realized something profound. The family Amanda had tried to exclude me from no longer existed, but in its place was something more valuable because it was real. The painful truth had indeed set us free, allowing us to build connections based on who we truly were rather than who we pretended to be. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Amanda and Jacob would eventually be released. Decisions about their place in our reconstructed family would need to be made. Brandon and Lily would continue their journey into adulthood, shaped but hopefully not defined by their parents' choices. My mother would continue aging, requiring new conversations about care and support. But the foundation for navigating these challenges was now solid, built on truth, respect, and genuine care rather than manipulation and pretense. The folder I had placed on the table that Thanksgiving Day had contained more than just evidence of fraud. It had contained the catalyst for transformation. As we gathered for a family photo against the sunset-painted mountains, I reflected on how far we'd come. The smiles in this picture weren't the perfect posed expressions of holiday cards past. They were genuine, if somewhat weathered by experience. They reflected people who had been broken but had rebuilt themselves and their connections with greater awareness and authenticity. Next year, my mother said as we headed back inside, let's make this our new tradition. Not running away from the past, but creating a future on our own terms. I looked at the faces of these people who were my true family, not because blood or law dictated it, but because we had chosen each other through the hardest of times. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible when I'd walked into last year's Thanksgiving dinner. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this account of our journey from betrayal to healing resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family transformation. And if you know someone struggling with family betrayal, consider sharing this with them sometimes. Knowing others have walked the same difficult path makes the journey a little less lonely. Thank you for listening to our story. And remember, sometimes the most authentic family bonds are those forged in the fire of difficult truths.